Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Films and Stuff. I'm Ethan, joined by my partner in crime, Pete. Hey, Pete.
How's it going?
Everything is great today. What is the theme of this show?
The macro view is this show is dedicated to Nintendo.
Yes, it is.
So we're going to do a quick fire, one-sided review of the Super Mario Brothers movie.
In cinemas now.
And we can also do a quick chat about the Tetris movie, which was released 2 weeks ago on Apple TV.
Oh, yeah. So you saw Super Mario Brothers.
I did.
Is it fair to say you've been chomping at the bit to see this for the past few weeks?
Very much so.
Tell me about the cinema. What's the age group going to this mostly?
Here's where it gets nuts. Before we even talk about the movie, two things. The film was released on Wednesday instead of the usual Fridays.
Yeah.
I saw it on Wednesday afternoon, bear in mind, at like 1 p.m., and the cinema was packed.
Really?
Unbelievable. I thought I would have the pick of
For
the
Mario.
seats. I thought it would be easygoing, no problem. I rocked up, and I was maybe the 50th, 60th person in the cinema when I walked in.
Are you kidding me? I can't even remember the last time I've been in a cinema with 50 or 60 people.
And that too for a matinee on a Wednesday.
Oh, yeah. Don't these people have jobs or school?
Absolutely rammed. And it was filled, I would say, 70% with kids.
Huh.
And I do mean that. I don't mean to be condescending and say anyone younger than me is a kid. I do mean like sub 15, maybe even sub 12 years old.
Like proper children.
Proper like children, like pre-teens to maybe early teens at the oldest.
Do they not have school?
I have no idea how they did it. I don't know what's going on. And it wasn't like 2 or 3. It was groups. There was one group that was like easily 10 kids strong. One group that was easily 15 kids strong with like 2 parents or 2 adults as chaperones. Maybe there was a holiday I don't know about going on. But anyway, it was absolutely packed.
Bonkers.
And the rest of the audience was, relatively older. And that they are whom I would probably assume are fans of the IP and, just nostalgic for Super Mario.
Yeah. So there was a Mario, it was live action. How many years ago
1993.
Did that
So exactly 30 years ago.
Really? It was that long ago?
Yeah.
And that like more or less widely flopped, right?
It was a part of
I don't even remember who was in that.
a spate of video game movies that were all critically panned. It was around the same time as, the Mortal Kombat movie, the Street Fighter movie, the Double Dragon movie, all of these like really crappy movies that came out because video game publishers realized they were sitting on a veritable gold mine, and they just threw together these shoddy live action remakes of movies. 1993 was Super Mario Brothers with
crazy.
John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins as Luigi and Mario.
Oh man, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah,
Bob Hoskins?
Awful. Yeah, Bob Hoskins played Mario.
John Leguizamo? Wow.
Played Luigi.
How old is he? I thought he was only like 35 or 40 years old.
Well, he's got great skin. And then you had Dennis Hopper playing Bowser.
Fiona Shaw was in that. Oh my gosh.
It was god awful.
Was it really? I don't even remember it.
It was really not good. It was like, I don't know. I didn't, even as a kid, I was like, I'm not liking this.
Wow. So how's the new one?
It's complicated. I have complicated feelings.
Oh.
It is awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
It's beautifully animated. I honestly think it's one of the best looking animated films I've seen in ages.
Oh, that's great to hear.
To the extent that it actually surpasses the actual Mario Brothers video game with ease. It's got so many Easter eggs that are, generally speaking, very accessible to the audience.
Oh, really?
There were some deep cuts in there, and you had to kind of pay attention to see some of them. But the beauty is that they included Easter eggs that even children would understand. so that they were just, because it was one of the first few times this year that I've heard that people were laughing in the cinema. They were clapping in the cinema. The kids were pointing at the screen. So it was a sense of not just nostalgia, but it was just like a sense of like joy and happiness at the screen.
It's good to have an uplifting movie.
Absolutely. You want movies to be excellent, but you also want movies to be lighthearted at times, right? And this is really a good lighthearted movie that way. The movie itself was obviously aimed at kids. There are elements of some of Illumination's other works, for example, like Despicable Me, which was aimed for kids, but also had messages for adults in there.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like the Minions movies are purely targeted for kids, lowest common denominator. This, I think, falls a little bit more on that side of the scale, which is not such a complicated plot. In fact, it's a very simple plot. Mario and Luigi start off in Brooklyn. They somehow get stranded in the Mushroom Kingdom. They get separated. And then Mario goes on a rescue mission to save Luigi from Bowser. And he teams up with Princess Peach and Toad and Donkey Kong to go find them. And then, of course, Bowser, just like in the video games, he wants to kidnap Princess Peach so that he can marry her. Super simple.
Yeah.
It's something that a child would understand in terms of a plot, right? It's not complicated. There's no machinations. There's no politics involved. It's just simple. If you look at the critical reviews, they've all been middling to bad. Metacritic score has been quite poor, but I think you have to put on the glasses to say two things. First of all, this is Nintendo's first foray back into the big screen since 1993. So they're being very cautious and very careful with their IP. So they played it incredibly safe, middle of the road, down the line, didn't take any risks. And that's a good thing because they were clearly building up to a franchise. Like it's very obvious this movie was built and geared so that it could have sequels. And that's absolutely fine. I think a lot of people have to remember that this movie isn't targeted for like 50-year-old cinema critics. This is targeted to a 10-year-old child whose first video game interaction was probably Mario.
Is that really the age group? Is it 10? It's not like 5, 6, 7. It's kind of 10.
I would say it's anyone who's old enough to play video games, the youngest age of whatever that is, that's their target demographic onwards. They've kept it that generic. I hesitate to put an age bracket onto it because I saw some younger kids who, when they saw Yoshi on screen, were like, Yoshi, because they recognize that. Again, a nice feeling and a nice thing to see in the cinema as a fan of movies, as someone who enjoyed the video games. It's nice to see other people also share in the same kind of joy that I had.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I give the critical response a lot of flack for taking this movie too seriously. Again, ultimately, it was just fun, and I would say it's definitely worth a watch. For me, overall, this is probably a wait for streaming because I am older, I am an adult, and I understand that there's a couple different things. One, it's kind of hard to justify being an old single guy watching this movie surrounded by children. Right? Just the optics of it, maybe not the best.
Did you wear your trench coat again? I told you not to wear your trench coat.
But then the other thing is that also, as someone who's older, someone who's got a little bit more of a discerning taste when it comes to movies, you also appreciate that the movie isn't necessarily targeted for me, even though I am a fan of Mario. I would probably recognize that, hey, when this movie comes out on streaming, you should definitely watch it wherever it comes out. Having said that, don't let that dissuade you. If you're a fan of Super Mario, if you're looking for something super lighthearted and simple, this is it. You're absolutely not going to go wrong with it.
How long is the movie?
Very short. I think like 1 hour 40, 1 hour 50 at most. Like it was quite zippy for what it was. I would say the only comments I have, so the animation, fantastic, plot, passable. I would say the only other comment I would have is the voice acting. This generated a lot of controversy when it was announced because Chris Pratt voices Mario. Now, is Chris Pratt a dedicated voice actor? Absolutely not. Does this movie prove it? It kind of does because there are other voice actors who are better. Did he do a bad job? No. He did a fine job. I think that the people didn't like Chris Pratt coming onto this for political reasons and for socio-political reasons, not for proper reasons. He's generated a lot of controversy in his private life, which a lot of people kind of were just like, we should cancel him. We don't want him to do this. The second controversy also was because Chris Pratt got the voice, Charles Martinet, who voices Mario in the video games, he didn't get the role. So there was a lot of controversy with that.
How was Charlie Day as Luigi?
Phenomenal.
Oh, really?
So I would say the standouts were Jack Black as Bowser was obviously good. He was hamming it up. He was fantastic.
Yeah.
Anya Taylor-Joy as Princess Peach was also quite good.
Okay.
And Charlie Day as Luigi was, I think, actually the best. I think even though he had probably the fewest lines, he was probably the best in terms of representing Luigi on screen. I don't think anyone could have done a better job.
Wow.
And I think based on the reaction and based on his performance in this movie, I think it would be a real shame if they didn't give him a Luigi movie on its own. And he definitely could. There was a video game franchise called Luigi's Mansion starring just Luigi. They could easily make that a movie with him and it would be great. Again, Chris Pratt was very average. He wasn't good, but he wasn't bad at all. I think he was very serviceable. Some of the things he did were actually quite good. I thought Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong was not good.
Oh, really? Oh, that's a surprise to me.
It's just Seth Rogen. And Seth Rogen's got a very distinctive laugh. He's got a very distinctive voice. He didn't do anything. It was just Seth Rogen speaking as Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. Again, not bad, but it was just Seth Rogen. I was hoping for more. He did not deliver. Not great.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that was fine. Oh, of course, Michael Keegan-Key plays Toad was also very good because he's relatively good with voices, so he was fine.
Yeah.
The movie is exactly what it says on the box. It's fun, lighthearted, 90 to 110 minutes of joy for children. And the movie is going to make a boatload of money. I would bet anything that it takes all the records for movies based on a video game, which I think stands with Sonic the Hedgehog.
I was just going to ask, how did you like Sonic the Hedgehog and how did you like Jim Carrey in that movie?
So Jim Carrey, I thought was excellent. I thought he was probably the best part of that. I thought Ben Schwartzman, I can't remember, was very good as the voice. But the movie itself was meh. And, that's what you get when you have a mixture of live action and animated. It's hard to pull that off. I think they would have probably been better off if they just made the full movie animated.
Yeah.
But it wasn't bad. It really wasn't bad. And in terms of video game adaptations, probably one of the better ones that we've ever seen. So, no, you can't fault it for that.
Sonic isn't nearly the iconic character, though, that Mario is.
Nowhere near. Mario is worldwide famous. Right. Sonic is also famous, but nowhere near as Mario.
Yeah.
After having seen this movie, I did a little bit of research on the side, and I wanted to point this out.
Yeah.
I think this movie cements Illumination/Universal Studios as the de facto animated movie producer now. I think it's taken the crown away from Disney.
Yeah, tell me why. That's a huge statement to make. I want to hear it.
So the last 5 cinematic releases for Disney/Pixar were, and I'm not including, by the way, releases they only did on streaming. These are the cinematic releases. Strange World, Encanto, Lightyear, Onward, and Raya and the Last Dragon.
The only one I recognize is Lightyear.
Right.
Although I feel like I've heard of Encanto.
In any case, the average Metacritic, 67 for those movies. Not great, not bad, but I mean, certainly terrible compared to Pixar's earlier works. That's the first point. Approximate budget for those 5 movies was $780 to $800 million without advertising.
Whoa.
Okay, for those 5 movies, guess how much the box office was? $770 million.
Whoa. They took a loss? Whoa.
Yeah, it's awful. Again, it doesn't include a bunch of those movies that got released on Disney Plus day and date, like Turning Red, Luca, and Soul, some of which had budgets of $200 million each.
How is that possible?
That's Disney. Now, let's look at Illumination/Universal.
Yeah.
The last 5 cinematic releases: Minions: Rise of Gru,
Oh, yeah.
Sing 2,
Oh, yeah.
Secret Life of Pets 2,
Oh, yeah.
The Grinch 3,
Yeah.
and Despicable Me 3.
Wow.
Okay? Now, here's where it gets interesting. Average Metacritic is pretty bad, only 52. So critically worse than the Disney movies.
Yeah.
But here's where things get spicy. Total budget, guess how much?
500 million.
395 million.
Whoa. Dramatically less. Yeah.
Almost half of the last 5 cinematic releases of Disney's. Now, guess the total box office.
More than 700 then, right?
$3.34 billion.
Whoa.
So almost a 10 times return on their production budget. Almost
My
10
hat
times.
is off to you, Pete, for this research. That's incredible research.
So that's just the last 5 movies. The longer back you go, the better the numbers look for Disney because they've got more releases and they've got bigger hits. But the last 5 movies is not a small number of films either, at the best case. It highlights the downward trend of revenue for Disney because they're spending up the wazoo. You're looking at an average budget of $150 to $200 million per movie, but you're not getting that money back.
I have to say, all of that spending surprised me because apart from Lightyear, none of those seem like premier franchises. You know, like Minions, Gru, that's now a premier franchise. You know, the Toy Story, Lightyear, that's a premier franchise. But all the other stuff where you talk about like Encanto and I can't even remember the other stuff on the list. None of those at all seem like premier franchises that should have like these huge ticket prices.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, that's the thing is that Universal knows that outside of the Minions and Gru, they don't really have what I would consider like a world famous franchise in there, right? Obviously, Despicable Me is. Obviously, the Minions are.
Yeah.
But, you know, The Secret Life of Pets, not really. The Grinch, definitely not. Sing? No, definitely not. And yeah, it plays out in their Metacritic, but it doesn't play out in the box office. The box office is through the roof. And because they know that these aren't crazy good franchise movies, they don't spend like crazy on them. $80 million, $100 million to make the movie, that makes sense to me. $200 million to make Encanto doesn't make sense.
What's on deck for each of them? Have you seen like what are the next couple that are going to be released by each?
I read that Pixar is releasing Inside Out 2 next year. And then I saw a trailer for another Pixar or Disney movie actually, but it's so like it's already slipped my mind. Oh, it's called The Elements. I think it's called Elements. Earth, Wind, Water, and Fire, something like that. So that's one. And then I'm pretty sure Universal is working on a Despicable Me 4 movie.
Of course.
For next summer. And if that comes out, I mean, that's going to be whether the movie's good or not is irrelevant. It'll make a ton of money.
Wow, that's really interesting to put it in perspective, though.
Yeah, exactly. The point I was just trying to make is that the crown Disney has had historically for being like the king of animated movies, I don't think that's actually there. I think they're skating by on their reputation more than they are on actual history.
So this was also interesting because this was, I guess, in some way or another, a collaboration between Nintendo and Universal, right?
Yes, exactly.
Is Nintendo now back into the game? And are they going to be doing more animated or live action films?
I think this movie is going to be their litmus test. So there have been rumors that this movie is tracking for $1 billion worldwide.
Wow.
And if that's the case, I don't see why they would let off the gas. I think that based on this weekend's numbers alone, which I think is going to be upwards of $150 million worldwide, I don't know why they wouldn't want to immediately greenlight a Super Mario Brothers movie 2 or a spin-off. This is the difference between Nintendo and Sega with Sonic.
Yeah, there's nowhere else in
spin off Sonic. Yeah. Without Sonic, you might have a Knuckles movie or maybe a Shadow the Hedgehog movie, and I'm really being generous.
Yeah.
But with the Mario Brothers, you can make a Mario standalone. You can make a Baby Mario movie. You can make a Yoshi movie. You can make a Princess Peach movie. You can make
Yeah.
a Luigi movie. You
Yeah.
can make a Bowser standalone movie.
Yeah.
Oh my God. They didn't even
Yeah.
introduce, but there could be a Wario and Waluigi movie. There's so
Yeah.
many different things they could do.
Yeah. I agree.
There's at least 5, 6, maybe even 10 different IPs that they could do in the movies that they haven't even touched upon yet.
I agree. Yeah, there's so many more characters. I mean,
by the way, that doesn't include Donkey Kong. That doesn't include The Legend of Zelda. That doesn't include any of the other.
Toad. What about Toad? If there's a Minions movie, there can definitely be a Toad movie.
Exactly. Metroid. There's so many first
Metroid.
party IP that Nintendo owns that they can so easily make into an animated movie or maybe a live action movie or whatever. I mean, I'm not suggesting they do. I think there's a charm to animated movies that Nintendo could capitalize on. And I expect that after this weekend, somebody at Nintendo's headquarters is going to sit up and say, what are we doing?
We've got a lot of opportunities.
Here's another $1 billion. Go make 10 more movies.
Yep. So, time for a segue. We just talked about what Nintendo can do based on the Mario movie. We also had this week, we watched on Apple TV Plus, the Tetris movie, which isn't necessarily a Nintendo IP, but it's definitely thought of.
I think it became famous because of Nintendo.
Yeah, inseparably with Nintendo, with NES, with Game Boy. Did you watch it on Apple TV Plus? How did you like it?
I absolutely did. So you told me about it because I was busy watching the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Yeah.
I saw it that same weekend, and I was messaging you while watching the movie.
It's fantastic, right?
I loved it.
It's fantastic. And I think the beautiful thing about this movie is the story is very good. And if you just watch the movie, you're like, that was a great movie. I like the idea that it's a challenge to make a movie about an inanimate object and try to create a story around that thing, right? Like Tetris is a game. It's not a documentary. It's not a technocratic piece on the development of it. It's putting a human face and a story and a little bit of, can we say, drama and angst around how this came, right? And it brought in the idea of Nintendo. It brought in the idea of the Game Boy and the success of the Game Boy. It brought in political elements of Russia and the Kremlin and communism and the fall of the Berlin Wall. It brought in so many different elements. And I think if it was not done this well, it could have been a disaster, like really an abject disaster that would have focused on too many things and not found its footing and not been compelling and not be dramatic and not given people a reason to continue watching. So I have to say, this is an incredible piece of film production because they took a game that's not the most dynamic game, unlike Mario, right? Where there are a lot of characters. There's no characters in Tetris. There's only one screen in Tetris, right? We're only talking about shapes. Yeah. And somehow they took that game and they introduced so many other different people that had involvement in it and really made this a much more personal look at how this game was legally licensed outside of Russia and how it was given the opportunity to have the worldwide audience that it has. And it is, by all measures, the most played, downloaded, purchased, installed game of all time. Second place, I think, is Minecraft. And Minecraft is maybe like half. I think that Tetris, it's estimated to be over 1 billion. There's a Tetris website, by the way, which I went to. But Minecraft is like 500 million. I mean, it's nowhere in the same ballpark, right? And then all the other things that we've played, like Halo and blah, 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 it's all in like 200 millions and 300 millions, which are huge numbers for games, right? Red Dead 2, for example. But Tetris is, by and large, the universal leader for exactly the reasons that Taron Egerton even said, this will appeal to everybody. You know, and it's interesting, we just talked about the Super Mario movie because the Game Boy which was a handheld device subsequently released by Nintendo, was originally going to be packaged with a copy of Super Mario Brothers 2 in it, I guess.
Yeah.
And Taran said, look, you'll sell a lot of units. That's a very popular game, but it won't appeal to the moms. It's not going to appeal to adults. If you want to sell this to everybody, you've got to pair it with Tetris. And he was, to his credit, absolutely spot on about understanding how that would work, right?
Yeah.
He deserves an incredible amount of credit for really identifying what an addictive, fascinating game Tetris was, and the staying power that it would have. I don't know if he's really such a good guy in real life, but he was portrayed as a very honest, decent, morally upstanding business person who just kind of wanted to do the right thing. Another example of Apple TV Plus coming back with a very positive role model type character in their lineup, right?
I think what's really important is something you mentioned, but ultimately this is almost like a legal drama. They made it incredibly fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in real life it was a lot more dry and it was a lot more boring, although of course there must have been tension because it involved Soviet Russia at the time.
Yeah.
But they took something that was effectively a legal maneuver and made a phenomenal movie out of it. I don't think I'm being specious when I say that I would put this in the same ballpark, pun intended, with movies like Moneyball.
Oh, Moneyball is a great example. I was thinking also The Big Short.
Or The Big Short, exactly. Like it's a biopic about not just an individual person, but about a phenomenon.
Yeah. I think the difference between Big Short is both of these dealt with potentially very technical topics.
Exactly.
But remember, The Big Short had something interesting where they broke down the fourth wall, explained topics, whereas Tetris partially didn't need to do that, but they went through the process of who owns the handheld rights, who owns the console rights, what's the definition of computer. I thought they dealt with those things very, very elegantly. Not easy to write dialogue.
I'm certain the legalese would be awful, but they simply said, hey, listen, what defines a computer? The keyboard. Your average layperson will understand. They're like, oh yeah, I know what a keyboard is. That makes sense.
I thought it was a great movie. Not just a great movie, but I'm really impressed by how they made it so compelling on a potentially dry topic, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you went to, I guess they got the rights from the Tetris company, right? And if you'd say, hey, we want to make a movie about this, they say, okay, great. It's got brand recognition. We understand. But what's the angle? How are we going to approach this? I'm thinking, though, there was one scene that was a little bit strange where, remember, there was kind of like a car chase going to the airport?
Yeah, the very end. I mean, that I think they did for the sake of dramatization.
Yeah, and they made that car chase scene, but remember, they put some animation in it.
Yeah.
Which reminded me a little bit of, do you remember The Beach with Leonardo DiCaprio? Where he's running through the forest?
Yeah.
And for a while, they turned him into kind of like an animated, video game character. That's the only place I think Tetris strayed a little bit from there.
I don't think it was necessary. I think it would have been fine without it. But I also understand that they wanted to make that a little bit more dynamic.
Yeah.
Because that last sequence that you're talking about seems relatively out of place considering how straightforward the rest of the movie was.
It's not intended to be this James Bond action, Michael Bay.
And then all of a sudden they're switching planes or they're they're doing that. I think that on its own, where the guy enters the wrong plane and he looks through the window to see the real plane go off, I think that is enough.
Yeah, I thought that was good. So I'm sure a few creative liberties were taken with this, make some things more dramatic, simplify some things, as you mentioned. But overall, I thought it was really an incredible effort. There's something else which I think we need to point out about this movie. This is exactly the type of movie that I feel streaming platforms should be making.
100%.
We've seen so many mistakes by Netflix. Even Apple maybe has strayed, but Netflix comes to mind first and foremost. This is the type of movie where if you're going to make a feature film, if you're going to make something that's 90 plus minutes, it should focus on something really, an interesting story like this. Do it and do it well. Don't try to create a franchise with world building. Stick to something and do it very, very well. And when people turn it off, they're like, that was a good movie. Make it appeal to everybody. And I thought that this was just a great test case, for Apple making a full-length movie.
Absolutely. This was interesting and obscure at the same time. Everyone knows Tetris.
Yes.
That's not a question.
Yeah.
But maybe out of every 100 people who are aware of Tetris, maybe one knows how the story of actually came to be.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me want to know more, not just about Tetris, but to be honest, I don't really know a lot about the creation of Atari or NES or Mario Brothers, or there's a lot of other things that potentially, would be, I think, equally compelling if they could do them right, right. But this one was super good. Since we talked about Mario Brothers on this episode, I thought it's only natural that we bring this one up as well.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And look, they're both connected at the hip to Nintendo. Say what you will, Tetris is a standalone game, fine.
Yeah.
But had they not tied it up with the Game Boy, not even the Nintendo, not even Super Nintendo or any other console, had they not tied it up with the Game Boy, it wouldn't be as famous as it is today.
Okay, so that is our Nintendo-centric episode of Films and Stuff.
If you liked the movies, either Tetris or the Super Mario Brothers movie, did you agree with critics? Did you think the movie was kind of boring? And is it worthy of a less than 50 on Metacritic? I personally don't think so. But if you agree or disagree, let us know. Reach out, drop us a comment below this video. Email us, aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com. Tweet at us at FNDS or DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast.
We will be here looking forward to your comments and feedback. Everything and anything Nintendo related. Pete, I want to thank you for doing the hard work and watching Mario. And thanks to both of us for doing the hard work and watching Tetris.
Until next time, thanks everyone. Thanks, Ethan.
All right, everybody. Have a great day. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.